And speaking of painting, our favorite man with a painted face was up next in another one of his videos. Darby Allin, in black and white as usual, zipped a guy up in a body bag, except his arm was hanging out, so we know it was a person. And then you see that the body bag is being hung from a helicopter that's flying in the air, and Darby's in the helicopter. And then Darby jumps out of the helicopter, and the screen goes black. So you don't see where he landed or what happened to the guy in the body bag on the rope. And what the fuck did that have to do with this match?
Darby does little artistic videos.
What? Anyway, guess what happened next? Like Mussolini and Kennedy and Joseph Stalin.
Who does that rhyme with?
And Lucky Pierre.
Seth Rollins.
Seth Rollins and Joseph Stalin.
They should make him Seth Stalin. He'd be so much more interesting. He's got the beard already. Seth Stalin.
Like Nikita Khrushchev. Anyway, Darby Allin and CM Punk and Sting wished Darby Allin well and stayed in the back. And then we got the entrance, and as Mrs. Grimm's baby boy would say, it's clobbering time. And this time Punk comes out, and he's got a game face on, and he's serious. He's not smiling and happy and soaking in the love because he's got a fight coming up instead of a promo. It looked right. And by the way, did you hear what CM Punk, the weight that he was announced at?
Actually, I missed that. What was he announced at?
218 pounds.
Oh, good. As it should be.
As it should be. He's a grown man. You can't get away with too much. But 218, if he's 198, he looks 218. He's looking good. He got a little bit of a tan there. He's fucking been obviously training. So, and he's a tall guy. So, yes, you can get away with 218. And I don't, I would think that Lee Johnson, going back to that earlier, if I was standing next to Lee Johnson, he'd look physically a little bit bigger than me. I weigh 201 pounds. And this is the lightest I've ever been, and I'm a small person for the wrestling business. So I don't understand what their fucking problem is with trying to make more of their guys look like grown adults. Anyway, watching them look at each other, Darby Allin and Punk, at the start of this thing was better than a lot of the matches. Punk even got a pop for sitting down and looking at Darby because Darby was doing the spooky I'm looking at you in the corner thing. And they got a holy shit chant for sitting down and looking at each other because they're over. And they worked this match like veteran versus upstart. They did wrestling moves. Punk's facials and reactions. At first, he was kind of taking him a little bit for granted, and then it was a little more serious. They had a pace, the ebb and flow. It was like watching Jerry Lawler call or ring general a match where everything follows. There's nothing out of place. Everything makes sense. And you don't run off and leave people, so everything registers. And this is the best I said before earlier in the show. It's the best match I've ever seen Darby Allin have. It's the best he's ever looked because he's explosive. He may be small, but he hits hard. We've talked about it. When he does the dives, he's the only one that looks like he's trying to hurt somebody instead of doing a belly flop in a swimming pool with a bunch of people to catch him. And unusual things come out of nowhere with him. Punk shoots him corner to corner, and he took a bump through the buckles sideways and to the post and to the floor. And then guess what happened? Punk went out there and grabbed him and threw him in the ring and covered him and tried to beat him. Imagine that. Who could have ever thought of doing something like that in a wrestling match? Now he works the injured back. He gets the bow and arrow. He gets the abdominal stretch. This match made sense. Punk kept control of the pace. You could see him every once in a while reminding or shepherding Darby with something. But it wasn't like, as I mentioned before, this pace was up and down. It wasn't like Jericho where he eliminates any extra movement. Punk was still explosive when he should be. All his shit looked good. He was always in the right place. And he allowed Darby Allin to get his shit in where it made sense and where it would make a difference. And then a series of false finishes by Darby Allin. He turned the belly to back off the top into a cross body. And that was a heck of a bump. I'm sure Punk was like, well, I remember that from 7 years ago. That was a heck of a bump. But anyway, and then that deep in the match, they got the double bridge. And I know that it's not Flair and Steamboat and Darby Allin's 150 pounds, but still that deep in the match, that was Flair's game. He would always, with Wyndham or with Steamboat or with Magnum or one of the athletic guys like that, he wanted to see how deep in the match they could go and still nail the double bridge. And if it was like 30 minutes in, he's like, yeah. Anyway, here's the part where Punk hits the go to sleep, boom, and Darby goes through the ropes and to the floor. That was great because the guys hit his finish, but the opponent is out on the floor and
great bump.
But then here was the same thing they did in the previous match. They've seen this on a Japanese tape, as I remember it from 30 years ago. And so now that's all that they do. They lay there like they're dead, milking the count until 9, and then suddenly come to life, roll back in the ring, and then lay there dead again. Isn't it more dramatic and less see-through if you take a bump like that and you're trying for the count to inch and crawl and scratch and drag your way back into that ring, and it doesn't look like you're going to make it, and then you last minute heave instead of just, I'm dead. Oh, I'm in. Now I'm dead again. So I'm not a fan of that. And they did it the same spot, 2 matches on the same show. Punk was hitting nice forearms that actually looked like they might be connecting. He calls for his go to sleep with his little sleepy bye thing. He goes for it. Darby Allin hits the elbows. Punk peels out to the floor. Darby hits the dive hard and then did a flip off the top of a rope, and both of them sold that. They're selling these things in between. They're not just jumping up. And then finally, Darby gets Punk back in the ring, goes for the coffin drop. Well, how in the world can you foil a coffin drop? I don't know. Sit up. And that's what he did. Punk
that was up. Brilliant. That was so perfect. That was great.
And then he's got a look on his face like, yeah, I did that. And then, Darby tries the flippy-do stunner, but Punk caught him, had him up over his shoulder. The second go to sleep, and this one's in the ring, and 1, 2, 3. Great job. Darby Allin has the best match he's ever had. CM Punk wins his debut. It's the first AEW match that ever, I think, that didn't bury the referee. And as we mentioned, I think, last week on the program, the idea here in a perfect world would be for CM Punk to have the best match with Darby Allin Darby Allin's ever had and make him look like a star in the process and then win it. And that's what he did. So, again, it's a schizophrenic program, and this was quality shit, and somehow they're going to have to bring dragging, kicking, and screaming, in some cases, the rest of the roster up to this level of conduct. If they don't, they're going to continue to have great segments in the middle of fucking amateur hour.
I thought it was great. It started off slow, and it worked because the crowd there they were in the Punk. They wanted to see it. And then the split chants, that was nice to see because they are both baby faces. It was very reminiscent, and I saw a few other people have the same thought, very reminiscent of Bret Hart versus the 1, 2, 3 Kid on Raw. I wonder if they watched it before they put this together or thought about what they were going to do. I'm glad there was no big aftermath. It ended exactly how it should. Can't complain. Can't say anything bad about this. This was great. A few points I'm watching this. I'm the same age as Punk, and I've taken the same amount of bumps as Punk in the last 7 years. And there were a few points where I'm watching his face and his selling, and I'm like, oh, man. He's feeling it. He's saying, what the fuck did I do? But it was great. And you know what? Excitement is so hard to come by sometimes in wrestling. And that's why AEW is connected with so many people. We're just looking for excitement. I'm excited to see what they're going to do next with Punk. So far, he's got a very high batting average. Everything he has done has made sense. You may not agree with 2.0 or Daniel Garcia, whoever being involved, but everything he has done, and I don't agree with him getting physical before the pay-per-view, but everything he has done has a very high batting average so far.
But remember, I said I understand they wanted heels for fodder if the guys
you did. Yes,
carried the thing off a little bit better. But and Sting came out and shook hands with Punk. So everybody's happy there.
You needed that at the end. You needed the handshake with him and Darby and, of course, him and Sting.